The river never lies. Its currents carry truth as surely as they carry silt and stone. To the tribe, its waters were more than life. They were memory, prophecy, and warning. On its banks, fish bones were scattered after every feast, their whorls and cracks red like the lines of the sky. From them omens emerged, floods foretold, safe crossings revealed, seasons marked in silent ivory. Among those who listened was a boy with patient hands, chosen to be the apprentice of the river reader. He knelt in the mud, arranging bones into patterns, hearing whispers others ignored. The people trusted him. His rival, however, did not. Envy rose like a hidden current, swift and unseen, pulling him toward betrayal. One dawn, the apprentice was found face down in the shallows, his hands still clutching a string of carved fish bones. The rival wept false tears and told the people he slipped. The river has taken him. They believed, because grief blinds more than night. But rivers carry not only the dead. Days later, downstream, the apprentice's carvings surfaced again, bones etched with warnings of envy and deceit. Truth, once drowned, returned in silence, ready to judge. This is the story of when the river whispered truth and envy turned it to lies. A betrayal carved in water and bone. The river wound like a silver serpent across the tundra. Its voice was never still, sometimes a whisper against stones, sometimes a roar after storms. To the tribe, it was not just water but a god, a teacher, a memory keeper. On its banks, they lived. Nets were strung from woven reeds. Spears tipped with bone flashed in the shallows, and children splashed where the current softened. Fires smoked with the smell of roasted fish, and bones always littered the edges, pale as teeth against mud. These bones were not thrown away carelessly. They were gathered, cleaned, and laid in patterns. Cracks, whorls, and ridges told stories. To the tribe, each fish bone carried a fragment of the river's voice. At night, after feasts, the river reader knelt among them. He was old, his back bent like a willow, his hands marked with ochre stains. He whispered to the bones as if they were alive, and when he lifted his head, the people held their breath. "Here is the river's word," he would say. "It will flood when the moon swells. Move camp, gather roots, mend your nets." His readings had saved them too many times to doubt. By his side knelt the apprentice, a boy not yet grown to a hunter's height. His hair was long and braided with shells. His fingers moved with patience, arranging bones in circles, tracing cracks with care. The people said the river favored his ears. He did not boast. He listened more than he spoke. When others laughed or played, he lingered by the current, watching the way foam clung to rocks, watching the way bones turned when water tugged at them. His gift was patience, and the river answered patience with whispers. But envy drinks silence like water. Watching from shadows was another youth, older, broader in shoulders, proud of his strength. He was praised for spears, not for listening. And though he smiled at the apprentice by day, his pride smoldered like embers under ash. The tribe did not see it. They praised the reader's apprentice, saying the river had chosen him. They pointed to the boy and told their children, "Learn as he learns, and you will hear the earth itself." Each word was a thorn to the rival's pride. One night, after a feast, the reader let the boy interpret a circle of bones. The boy hesitated, then spoke, "The river will rise 3 days from now. Do not hunt on the low bank." His voice trembled, but the elders nodded. 3 days later, water surged, swallowing the bank and tearing nets from poles. Had they hunted, men would have drowned. The tribe cheered the apprentice's gift, lifting him on shoulders. The rivals stood apart, fists clenched, smiling with his mouth but not with his eyes. The river carried fish. The river carried truth. But the river also carried envy, deep and hidden, waiting for its moment to break the surface. The days stretched into weeks, and the river thawed from ice into a rushing torrent. Fish leapt in silver arcs, their bones soon to join the growing shrine. The tribe trusted the boy more with each reading. He knelt daily, tracing whorls in fish vertebrae, aligning spines into circles. His eyes narrowed not with pride but with focus. He spoke rarely, and when he did, the people listened as though the river itself had spoken. The river reader watched with weary pride. His own hands trembled now, his voice rasped like dry reeds. He knew his time was ebbing like a fire burned low. He whispered to the elders, "The boy will replace me." That whisper spread like wildfire. Mothers nodded, children whispered, hunters grunted approval. The apprentice was no longer just a boy, he was the river's chosen heir. But one pair of ears burned with fury. The rival, older, broad-shouldered, envied in silence. His skill with spear and net was real, but it won no whispers of destiny. No one called him chosen. Each success of the boy was a wound. Each cheer from the tribe was salt in it. When the boy predicted rain, and rain came, the rival ground his teeth. When the boy predicted fish would gather and nets filled, the rival's fists tightened. He tried to best him in hunts. He returned with full nets and boasted. Yet all looked not at him but at the bones the boy had read. It was not muscle they praised, but the whispers of the river. At night, envy coiled tighter. He watched the apprentice sit by the water, head tilted as though hearing music no one else could. He hated the silence, hated the patience, hated that listening could win more than strength. One evening, the boy predicted an early frost. Hunters doubted, but the reader backed him. When frost struck 2 days later, killing unharvested roots, the rival felt the tribe's faith tip entirely toward the apprentice. Laughter haunted him, not loud, not cruel, but constant. Children whispering chosen one, elders pointing and nodding. Even the river seemed to mock him with its endless whispers he could not hear. He began to plot. He waited at the river's edge, testing currents, imagining how easily a body might slip beneath. He rehearsed words he would speak, words of false grief, yet still he hesitated. Envy is patient. It waits until the heart grows heavy enough to sink. The river ran dark that dawn, swollen from rain. Mist clung low, curling like spirits across the water. The apprentice rose early, before the fires stirred, before the tribe stirred. His hands carried a bundle of bones cleaned the night before. He knelt in the shallows, arranging them carefully. Vertebrae in a circle, jawbones in a crescent, spines aligned like paths. His lips moved in whispers, not to people, but to water. The river whispered back in foam and eddy. From the reeds, the rival watched. His breath was heavy, his fists tight around a sharpened stone. He saw the boy lean forward, tracing cracks in the pale bones. He saw the stillness, the quiet faith, and envy struck like lightning. He stepped forward, silent as shadow. The boy did not turn. So absorbed was he in the river's voice. The rival's hand shot out, one shove, sudden and hard, and the boy pitched forward into the current. The river gasped. Water swallowed him with a slap and hiss. He fought, thrashing, hands clutching the string of carved bones. But the current pulled fast, dragging him under, mud clouding the shallows. The rival crouched, feigning horror. He shouted, "Help! He slipped!" His voice cracked with false panic, but the only witness was the river itself. Moments later, the boy's body floated, face pale, lips blue. Fingers still clutched the string of bones. The current carried him to the bank, laying him like an offering. The rival stumbled to him, tearing at his hair, crying false tears. "He is gone," he wailed. His words rang across the camp as others rushed to the shore. The tribe gathered, gasps and cries rising. Mothers pressed hands to mouths, children hid their faces. The river reader collapsed to his knees, his old hands trembling as he touched the boy's lifeless cheek. The rival knelt beside the body, shoulders shaking with weeping, but behind his lowered eyes burned triumph, hidden, silent, black as the water that had taken the boy. The wail of the river reader carried across the camp like a wounded bird. His voice cracked with grief as he bent over the boy's still body. The old man pressed his forehead to the apprentice's chest, as if begging the river to give its breath back. But the chest did not rise. Around them, the tribe gathered in silence, broken only by sobs. Mothers clutched their children closer, fathers lowered their spears in mourning. The boy's hands, still clenched around the string of carved fish bones, were pried open with care. The bones fell into the mud like pale tears. The rival knelt beside the corpse, his face streaked with water and ash. "He slipped," he whispered hoarsely. "The river's current was strong. I tried, but I was too far." His words trembled with practiced sorrow. He pressed his fists to his eyes until his skin turned red. The river reader looked up, his aged eyes hollow. The river chose him. Why would it take him so soon? His voice broke, a reed snapping underfoot. No one answered. The silence was filled by the endless murmur of the current, carrying its secret downstream. The funeral was held before the sun reached its height. The boy's body was laid upon a bier of woven reeds. Stones smoothed by the river were placed across his chest, symbols to weigh him in the afterlife. The carved bones he had clutched were tied to his wrists with sinew. Smoke rose from torches as the tribe chanted. The river lapped gently at the bank as if listening. The reader's voice shook. "Return him, river. Carry his spirit where waters do not freeze. May his bones speak forever in your current." The body was lowered into the shallows, the current wrapping around it like arms. Slowly, the apprentice was carried away, vanishing into the bend where the river foamed white. The tribe bowed their heads and their grief flowed with the water. When the wailing subsided, eyes turned to the rival. He stood apart, face pale, shoulders shaking. "The river must still be read," he said quietly. "The tribe cannot live without its word." The elders, heavy with grief, nodded. The river reader, bent low, wept silently. At last he croaked, "You are strong. If the river has taken one, perhaps it points to another. Take the bones. Speak if you can." The rival bowed low, pressing the bones to his brow as though humbled. But behind the veil of lowered lashes, triumph glimmered. That night he sat before the fire, the tribe gathered in a circle. Fish bones cracked in the flames, throwing sparks skyward. He spoke with confidence, though the bones told him nothing. "The river warns of hunger if we do not move camp. We must follow the cliffs." The people murmured. Some nodded, eager for direction in their grief. Others glanced uneasily at the river reader, who said nothing, his eyes clouded with sorrow. In silence, the tribe agreed, but not all were convinced. A few children whispered, remembering how the apprentice once said the river's voice was clearest when still, not when rushed. A mother clutched her daughter's hand, recalling how he had predicted frost. Their hearts questioned, but their tongues stayed silent. Grief is heavy. It smothers doubt. It crushes suspicion. The tribe, mourning too deeply, chose to believe. Days passed. The rival wore the mantle of reader with growing pride. He dusted bones with ash, traced cracks with fingers, and spoke loudly, confidently, yet his words did not always match the river's moods. When he predicted fish at the shallows, nets came back light. When he promised fair skies, storms rolled in. Whispers began to stir. "Perhaps the river is angry," said some. "Perhaps it mourns its chosen one," said others. None dared say the truth. Perhaps the new reader was false. The river reader sat in silence most days, staring at the water, hearing only his own breath. His heart had cracked with the loss of his apprentice. Doubt gnawed at him, but he was too weary to fight it. His faith had been drowned along with the boy, and so the rival ruled. He stood at council, his voice strong, his arms broad, his eyes burning with pride. He relished the weight of the tribe's gazes, even if some looked at him with doubt. He silenced them with confidence, with commands, with the mask of authority. But the river was restless. Its currents grew harsher, its banks more unstable. Once, when the rivals spoke a prophecy of peace, the river flooded, swallowing the fire circle and sweeping away tents. People muttered in fear, but still clung to his words, too lost in grief to seek another. The bones grew restless too, their cracks split differently, their ridges darker, their whirls filled with silt. They no longer lay smoothly in patterns, but shifted oddly when placed. The tribe said nothing, but in their hearts they wondered. Perhaps the bones were angry. Still, the rival sat with them, forcing meaning into silence, twisting prophecy to fit his pride. And still the river reader, bent and broken, said nothing. The truth lay hidden, carried in secret by the current. The boy's bones had been buried, but his carvings had not been lost. They were waiting, caught between stones downstream, ready to rise again when the river chose. The camp moved on, following the rival's words. Fires were quenched, hides folded, sleds packed heavy with stone and wood. The river murmured as always, but its song had changed. Where once it whispered calm, now it gurgled harshly, churning against rocks. At night, the people sat by small fires. Their voices were low, their laughter gone. They still asked the river for guidance, but now the words came from the rival's mouth. His voice was strong, his eyes fierce, yet the current beneath felt hollow. The old reader shrank further into silence. He sat by the riverbank each evening, tracing water with his hands. Sometimes his lips moved, as if speaking with the current, but no words reached the tribe. They saw only a broken elder, and their trust shifted to the younger, louder voice. But doubt gnawed at the edges of their faith. When the rival promised full nets, fish avoided the shallows. When he spoke of clear skies, storms ripped across the plain. When he promised peace, the river rose without warning, sweeping away the night fires. Children asked their mothers, "Why does the river punish us?" The mothers hushed them, but their eyes were clouded. Hunters grumbled that the bones no longer spoke clearly. The rival silenced them with anger, claiming the river's grief made its voice heavy. Yet the river itself seemed alive with unrest. The banks crumbled, trees toppled, and eddies twisted with strange force. The people said the water was mourning the apprentice, that it had carried away its chosen one and would never be the same. In dreams, some swore they heard whispers in the rush of current, whispers not of the rival's voice, but of another, soft, patient, the voice of the boy they had lost. They woke with hearts racing, but by dawn, the rival's commands drowned their doubts again. The silence in the tribe grew thick. No one spoke against him. No one dared to name envy. To accuse was to risk exile, and grief had stolen their courage. The rival grew bolder. He demanded the best cuts of fish, the thickest hides. He stood taller in council, speaking with arrogance. His pride was no longer hidden. He claimed the river had chosen him to replace the one it had taken. The river reader watched in silence, his eyes sunken. Yet when no one looked, he knelt by the water's edge and whispered, "Bring him back. Bring back his truth." His voice was swallowed by the current. The water answered not with words, but with action. It surged harder, flooding banks, breaking branches, scattering bones. And far downstream, something shifted. Among reeds and stones, a bundle of carved fish bones, clutched tight by a lifeless hand, loosened from its resting place. The river had carried away a body, but it had not drowned truth. It had only hidden it, waiting for the right moment to return it. The river had carried the apprentice away, but the river does not forget. Its currents coil, its bends turn, and what is hidden in its depths often resurfaces. The truth, drowned in grief, was still alive in bone. Children were the first to find it. They were playing downstream, skipping stones and chasing frogs in the shallows. One boy shouted as his foot struck something sharp beneath the mud. He reached down and pulled up a string of bones, pale and etched with marks. The children gasped. These were not ordinary bones. Each one was carved, spirals etched deep, patterns that seemed alive with meaning. They ran to the camp, holding them aloft like treasure. The people gathered, murmuring. The rival frowned, his eyes narrowing. He reached to take them, but the old river reader stepped forward faster than he had in moons. His gnarled hands trembled as he touched the carvings. "These are his," the elder whispered. His voice broke. "These are the apprentice's bones. I watched him carve these marks with patience. I saw him etch the spirals that told of floods and famine. He left his voice in them." The tribe gasped. Mothers crossed themselves. Children clung to their mothers' cloaks. The rival laughed harshly. "Bones wash down river every season. These mean nothing." But the people were not convinced. They turned the bones in their hands, saw the care, the detail, the unmistakable touch of their lost apprentice. These were not random cracks of river-worn spines. These were messages. The reader held them close, tears streaming down his face. "The river has returned him," he said. "Truth cannot drown. Envy cannot silence it. The bones have spoken again." The rival stepped forward, his voice rising. "Do not listen to an old man's grief. The river chose me. It took him. Why should it return him?" His words echoed harshly, but doubt stirred among the people. That night, the bones were laid upon hides by the fire. The people gathered in silence as the reader traced the spirals. His voice trembled. Here is his last message. Envy twists prophecy. Beware the false hand that bends truth. Gasps filled the circle. All eyes turned to the rival. His jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. "A coincidence," he said. "Old cracks misread as words. The river speaks through me now, not through the dead." But his voice no longer held the same power. The bones glowed faintly in firelight, etched lines catching sparks. And in the eyes of the tribe, doubt was no longer silence. Doubt was becoming voice. The river had whispered truth again, and this time the people were ready to listen. The bones lay upon the hide, pale against the dark leather. Firelight danced across their spirals, shadows turning them into living lines. The tribe circled close, eyes wide, breath held. The old reader lifted one bone high. "These are not chance cracks. These are carved by the hand of my apprentice. I saw him etch the spiral of flood, the crescent of famine, the mark of warning. They are his voice, and his voice names envy." The rival rose, face tight, jaw clenched. "Lies of an old man," he snapped. "The river does not return the dead. It returned bones, nothing more. I am the reader now. I speak the river's will." But whispers swelled. Mothers murmured. Hunters exchanged glances. Children pressed closer to their mothers, eyes fixed on the glowing spirals. Doubt grew heavier than silence. At last, the river reader raised his trembling hand. "Then let the fire decide. If these bones are false, they will burn. If they are true, they will speak once more." The people gasped. Fire as judge was rare, reserved for grave disputes. But all nodded. It was the only way. A pit was dug. Coals glowed red. One by one, the bones were cast into the flames. The rival smirked, certain that fire would silence them. He crossed his arms, his smile sharp as a spear. But as the bones heated, cracks split open. Steam hissed. The spirals glowed faintly, lines darkening instead of fading. Patterns leapt like veins of light, twisting in fire until the message was clear. Envy bends truth. The people gasped as one. The old reader fell to his knees, weeping. Hunters growled, fists tightening. Mothers hissed curses. The rival's smirk faltered, his face pale in the firelight. He tried to shout above them, "Tricks! Coincidence! Fire splits all bones!" But no one listened. The flames hissed louder, as if the river itself roared through them. A hunter spat. "The river has spoken. You silenced truth. You drowned him." The rival's hand went to his spear. For a moment violence flickered in his eyes, but the circle closed around him. Hunters, elders, mothers, children. He was one against many. The old reader rose, his voice shaking but strong. "You are no reader. You are exile. The river rejects you. We reject you." The tribe shouted in agreement. The rival's name was spat like ash. His spear was seized, snapped in two, and cast into the fire beside the bones he had tried to bury. The rival stood trembling, rage in his eyes, shame on his face. But the circle did not break. The truth had risen, and no lie could drown it again. The rival stood in the circle of firelight, his shadow trembling against the cave wall. Broken spear fragments smoldered in the pit. The tribe stared at him as if at a stranger. No voice rose in his defense. The old river reader stepped forward. His face was streaked with ash and tears, but his voice carried. "The river has judged. The bones spoke truth. You silenced the chosen one. For envy, you drowned him. For envy, you must walk into silence yourself." The punishment was exile, worse than death. To be cut from the tribe was to be cut from warmth, from fire, from memory. Alone in the tundra, no one survived long. The people murmured their agreement, voices rising like a chant. Hunters seized the rival. They stripped him of furs gifted by the tribe, leaving only what he wore. His name was declared forbidden at the fire circle. His footprints would not be followed, his stories not told. He fought, shouting curses, spitting at the old reader, but the people dragged him to the riverbank. The current hissed, as if eager to take him. He staggered into the shallows, turned once, his eyes burning with hate, then vanished into the white plain beyond. The tribe stood long in silence. The river reader dropped to his knees, whispering to the current, "The lie has gone. Let truth remain." The river bubbled softly, carrying ash downstream, as if answering. That night the bones of the apprentice were set beside the fire. They glowed faintly in the flames, spirals shimmering like living voices. The tribe sang, their song low and steady, a hymn not of grief but of remembrance. The next morning the river ran calm. Its waters were clear, its song gentle. Nets cast into its shallows came back heavy with fish. The people smiled for the first time in many moons. The old reader lifted his hand. "The river has spoken again. It has given back its voice, but we must honor the one who carried it." He pointed to the bones, then to a young child seated near the fire. "A new apprentice will learn. The river will never be left unheard again." The child stepped forward shyly, laying a hand on the carved bones. The people cheered, not with wild joy, but with steady faith. A chain had been broken, but another link had been forged. Sira's name was not here, for this was another story, but the bones, like hers, had carried truth. The river had whispered it and even drowned. It had risen again. The tribe rebuilt faith in silence, in patience, in the listening of bones. They carved warnings into stone so envy could not twist memory again. They swore that whenever the river whispered, they would listen with open hearts. And so the tale was carried forward, not as a warning alone, but as a promise. Truth, though drowned, always returns. Thus ends the tale of When the River Whispered Truth and Envy Turned It to Lies. a story of patience, betrayal, and justice, carved not in stone but in bone and water. The river cannot be bribed. It cannot be silenced. It carries what we try to bury, and in time it returns it to light. If this story spoke to you, support the first Betrayals by liking this video, sharing it with others who love dark history and ancient myths, and subscribing for more forgotten tales carved in bone, blood, and fire.